Hi guys, Jamie here from JB Motion. In today's video, we're going to be making this. So the video, you can download that from the description below. We're going to be tracking our camera natively inside of Cinema 4D, where we're then going to be putting in our guy. I'm going to run through how I created the material to make him look like one of the chess pieces. We're going to be talking about lighting, render settings, and then compositing it all together inside of After Effects. So let's get started on this. Here we go. Hey guys, so this is the video that we're going to be using for this tutorial. You guys can download it from the description below. So I'm just going to drag this into the project panel here in After Effects, and if we hit Ctrl-Alt-G, the frame rate is set to this, so that's fine. So let's drag this down here now so we can have a look at the video. So it's just a 10-second clip, and that is good to go. So we need to export this as an image sequence so that we're going to be able to track it inside of Cinema 4D. So just go to Composition, Add to Render Queue, and let's let's set this up to be a PNG sequence, and we're going to output it to a folder called whatever, movie sequence I'm going to call it, and save that. So if we click on render now, that's going to render out each frame as a PNG image. So I'll pause the video and we'll pop back in once that's done. Cool, so that's finished rendering out as an image sequence. So let's just do a file save as, and we can save this out, this After Effects file. Just so we're saving memory on our machine for when we're jumping in Cinema 4D. So we can close this down now. And now we are in Cinema. So we're going to go to the track layout here. And if we double click here, we'll be able to create a motion tracker object. Double click again, we can select the footage that we just outputted from After Effects. So here it is. This is the movie sequence. Let's just click on any of these frames and that will come in. So let's crank up the resampling up to the max and let's just hit play on this. We're just going to be loading each of these frames into the cache. Cool, so now that's all loaded into cache. You can see we get a nice smooth playback. So let's go to the Objects tab here, click on Motion Tracker. So I want to mask out like everything aside from the chessboard, because we have a load of stuff here that we can track. We have somebody in the background moving around and bits and bobs that we don't want to track. So with the motion tracker object selected, go to Tracker and go to, where is it? Create Mask. So we're just going to create a mask roughly around the chessboard. We're going to try and exclude this reflection here because that's going to confuse our tracker. So we'll exclude that. Obviously we have a load of reflections, but we can't exclude all of them, but this is a pretty big one, so we'll get rid of that for now. And if I hit 0 on my keyboard, it's going to bring up my rectangle selection tool, and I'm going to use my little pinky finger to hover over the E on my keyboard because I'm going to be switching between the move tool, which is here, and the rectangle selection. So 0, E to switch between those. You could alternatively use the spacebar to switch between current and previous tool. So either way is going to work. So let's just grab this and go to your move tool and move that down. What we want to do is animate this mask. So we have one keyframe automatically put in since we moved those 2 points. So let's just scrub along here to around frame 60, and let's just grab these and reposition them using the rectangle selection tool and the move tool. Keeping that reflection out of the mask as well as best you can. Okay, so we're just almost done with this now. Just trying to keep this reflection, this like super, it's really like bright there. I'm trying to keep that out of the mask. And that is it. So if we scrub back and forth here, you can see that our mask is doing a pretty good job of just kind of doing what it's told, I suppose. And we want to make sure that this is set to include in mask. So everything else is going to be excluded. This is what we want to be focusing on for our track. So that's fine. What we can do at this stage is do a file, save as, and let's save this out. Cool. Okay, so now we click on our motion tracker, go to 2D tracking. We're going to create some auto tracks. Let's bring this up to like 500. And let's click on create auto tracks. Now we do have a bunch of tracks that are showing up on reflections on our chess pieces. What we can do is maybe just bring this up to like 100. That's going to get rid of a lot of those. So it's the amount of time that they are visible, the amount of time that they'll track. So they won't track for as long as, for example, this track, because the reflection's gonna either move around or fade away, I suppose. So let's just track forward now on this and see what we get. Okay, so the reason we tracked forward there is because we were on frame 0. If we were on frame the last frame, we would have tracked backwards. And if we were in the middle, we would have done forwards and backwards. So that's the reasoning behind that. Okay. So we're still getting some track points where the reflections are. We can just kind of highlight those. Now, you notice that I deselected the motion tracker and then selected it again. It wasn't allowing me to select that track point. Sometimes you just have to deselect and select again for it to allow you to be able to do that. Let's delete that one. Let's just delete any of these track points that we see that are noticeably on reflections. So there's actually quite a lot. It looks like we're not going to be left with many once we have deleted all the ones that are on reflections. But anyway, one of the rules for tracking is don't track reflections. So I suppose let's abide by the rules. Okay, so that's fine. There's another big obvious one there. Okay. So now if we scrub all the way to the end, you can see that we have no track points left. So we're going to have to create auto tracks again on the last frame. And this time we're going to be tracking backwards. Let's again just start getting rid of some of these track points that are tracking reflection. I don't think that, just one of those actually. These two, that one. All of these ones, I'd say. This one, I suppose. Okay, this one. And there's still obviously a few that are tracking reflections, but we're not going to be too nitpicky about those. So let's track backwards this time. Okay, so now we have a bunch of track points tracking backwards and forwards, and we can do another one if we go to like the middle, frame 150, and create more auto tracks, and then just do our quick tidy up of any ones that look like they're tracking reflections. So you can see I'm leaving out a bunch of them that actually are tracking reflections. And I'm not sure if this is going to drastically improve the track or not. I'm just kind of going on like the the fundamentals. Whenever you watch a tracking tutorial, the person speaking always says, try not to track reflections if at all possible. So that one's a big one there. This one here. And sometimes it's actually hard to see if it's actually tracking a reflection or not, because it's kind of covering over the reflection itself. Okay, so we'll leave it at that and do the last auto track, this time forwards and backwards, because we're in the middle frame here. Okay, so I think we're ready for the full solve. We'll do a file, save project, and we're going to go over to, with your motion tracker object selected, go to 3D solve, and we're going to do the full solve. Now just click on this button here, and we're going to give that a couple of seconds. You can see that it's loading down here, so I'll pause the video while that's doing its business. Okay, so now if we deselect our motion tracker, and if we hit play, now you can see all of our track points that are they're all pretty still. You know, we are tracking some reflections, but it doesn't seem to be an issue. Well, we won't know if it is just yet. So the next step is to click on the motion tracker object. We're going to create some constraints. So we're going to go to the tracker menu item here, go to constraints, and we're going to create a position constraint. So this is going to tell Cinema where we want the center of the world to be. So it would make sense that it would be right here in the center of the chessboard. So just click on that. So now you can see that the world center is set to be here. We're going to create another constraint. So click on your motion tracker again, go to tracker, constraints. We're going to create a planar constraint this time. So we're going to select 3 points here, and it's going to give us a plane. And we can say that that is going to be showing us the Y. So that's, if you drew a line from the top to the bottom, that's going to be the Y axis. And now we can create a plane. Let's see where our plane is. There it is. So I just had to click on it there for it to show up. So now you can see that our work plane has aligned itself to the chessboard pretty nicely. And if we hit play there, you can see that, well, hopefully we're not going to get any slipping and sliding. So it looks like a pretty solid track. We can even put in a little guy here as well. He's going to show up on world center. And if we just play that, you can see that it's looking pretty good. We can turn off our work plane as well. We don't need to see that anymore. Okay, so all in all, it's a pretty good track. So the next step is to find some animation, our animation character, our animated character. So we're going to be going into Mixamo for that. So just in Mixamo now, I searched for standing brief because I found this one, this animation, where he kind of looks at his watch impatiently. So I thought that was pretty cool. Like he's waiting for he's waiting for the opponent to take their move. So if you just, oh, by the way, the character I'm using, it doesn't have to be this character. You can pick any character, but I'm gone with this one because he's got no clothes on, and it's going to allow us to create a material or a material that's going to kind of replicate the pawns here, the other chess pieces. So this is the one where he's looking at his watch. It has loads of frames, so it's going to have enough frames for our scene. So we can just click on download, and 30 frames per second, that's what we're working with, and click on download there. Cool. Okay, so now we come back to Cinema. We'll do another file save. This time we're going to do file, merge, so that we can bring in our guy. Here he is here. Just click on OK, and it's going to ask, do we want to include takes? Just say no to that. So now we have our guy here. If we grab the geometry and the skeleton, hit Alt-G to group those into a null, and we can just call him our guy. And we can get rid of this figure now, and we can turn off the visibility of the plane. So Guy, we need a material for him. We are in Redshift automatically. So we want to create a new material for this guy. We can get rid of this one. And let's just double click to create a new material, and we'll pop this one on, the standard one on him for now, the default one I should say. And let's position him as well. So make sure that right now we are in 2D tracks mode. So we want to go to object mode. So we're going to be able to use our move tool and position him. We're going to have him over here. Let's rotate him as well so that he's facing the correct way. And we're going to scale him up to be relatively the same size as the king here. So we'll try 1.4. Oops. And 1.4. So, oops, okay, this is not going well. Okay, there we go. So he's looking, maybe he could be, yeah, he could actually be a lot bigger. Let's go we'll go 1.8. Yeah, something like that. That looks a bit better. And make sure he's in the center of the square. Now if we hit play on this, oh, where is he gone? He's jumping over all over the place. Okay, so why is he jumping around the place? He mustn't be positioned on the floor properly. So if we create a plane, and we'll call this floor, let's just bring this over to him. So, and we'll jump into our top view. And we'll bring our guy over to where we just put that plane, which is the floor. So you can see he's like way down below. Okay, and he's massive as well. So we want to, let's just get him on the floor first of all. Okay. And we need to scale him down. So I think I might have been right with my initial 1.4 guesstimate. Yeah. So now if we bring him back down to the floor, he's still too big, I'd say. We can turn this off. So we'll go 1.2 maybe. And then bring him back down to the floor. Yeah, okay. So we'll go with him at this size. And now if we hit play, you can see that he's firmly on the ground. And we want to get him looking at his watch as well. Oh yeah, so he does look at his watch, but you know, you're not going to see that. We want to actually see that. So if we open up our dope sheet here and just drag this up, let's select his bones and we can just drag the animation this way so that he's going to be looking at his watch sooner. We don't want to go too far, otherwise we're going to run out of animation. But yeah, that should be fine. And we'll just get rid of this. So now if we play that, you'll see that he's going to look at his watch. And that's good. He's like, what's going on? Why are you taking so long with your turn? Okay, cool. So let's do another file save and moving on. So an issue we have now is we are going to be rendering this out using Redshift, but we do not have a Redshift. We don't have a Redshift camera. So we have a standard Cinema 4D camera, but we don't have a Redshift camera. So we have to create one. And okay, so what's after happening there, right? That has basically taken the frames from the solved camera and put it into the Redshift camera. And that seems like it's a really good idea, but it's actually not, because if I jump into this and hit play, it's actually different. So this is our solved camera. You can see that it's not actually, well, you can't see it here, but if you take my word for it, I'll show you what I mean. If I go to the background and if I click on override here, because I want to get in my background, my movie sequence, so we can see what we're working with. If I click on this folder here and bring in my movie sequence, just double click there, say no on that. And we want this to animate. So right now it's not going to animate. So we need to unravel this, click on the animation tab, go to simple. And that's the correct frame rate, detect frames. Now we're going to get this animating in the background. Okay. So it's working now. So just ignore everything I just said, because for some reason this is actually working. This never really worked for me before. I had to go through this whole rigmarole. Let's turn this solve camera off. Okay, so that's great. Cinema has fixed itself. It seems to be good. Like everything seems to be fine. So just as a bit of an explainer to what I'm actually rambling on about here, before I would click on the create a Redshift camera, and then when I went to view the Redshift camera view, the track was all messed up. Like the camera wasn't in the exact same position as the Redshift camera wasn't in the exact same position as the solve camera, but it's working now. So awesome. That's good. I'll just switch back to this and turn off. Like it definitely seems different. I don't know, but it looks fine. I mean, is he still on the floor? He is, yeah, pretty much. We won't dwell on it too much, but I'm just kind of like, I'm just surprised that it's working so well, that's all. But yeah, okay, awesome. We can move on. So that saves us a whole bunch of steps as well. Cool. Okay, so let's do a file save and then we can move on. Okay, so we want to create a floor. Well, we already have that kind of done. So just create a plane if you haven't done so already. And I have mine. And I'm going to position this in the center, hit R on my keyboard to rotate it. And I just want to scale this up so that it extends way past the view of the camera out here. And the same, if I just jump into my top view, I'll do the same for the width. And we can bring down the segments down to 1 and 1. We don't need all those segments. And I'm going to bring this forward so that it's going to line up with the edge of our chessboard here. So if I go to my coordinates, I can fine tune the position of this in my floor in the coordinates tab. If I hold down Alt, then I can fine tune the position of this by holding down Alt. And we need to rotate this. Again, I'll hold down Alt so I can make small changes to the values here. Okay, cool. So that's our floor. Now we don't want to see it. So what we're going to do is right click, go to render tags and grab a Redshift object tag. Let's click on it and go to matte. We're going to click on override, enabled, and we're going to turn on shadows as well. Now we can't actually see what this is doing, so we'll do a file save and we'll open up our Redshift view. Don't break, don't break. Okay, there we go. Let's have a look at this now. Okay, so this is what it's looking like. So if I delete this, you can see our floor is there. Undo that, and now our floor is no longer there. And let's just kind of drag this out a bit. I'll close this down for now so we can see a bit clearer what we're doing. Okay, so we want shadows. So we need to enable shadows and we need to turn on effects alpha as well. Actually, we're still not getting shadows. We don't have a light source. So if I go to create a dome light, Now you can see we're getting some contact shadows there. Now, what I set this up initially, if I just open this up, let's see, if I go to File, Open, and I'll show you what I had set up for when I did this initially. So if I go to my dome light, go to Object. So I use this HDR. Where is it? So it's studio07.exr. Okay, so we go back to this. We'll go into our content browser and we'll type in HDRI, and we'll find that Studio 07. Where is it? Studio 07. Let's make this a bit bigger. Studio 07. Okay, so this is the one I use. So I'm just going to click and drag. You might have to download that. Just click the little download icon. I already have it done. Now if we hit play on this, now you can see we're getting some nice contact shadows and we're getting some specular highlights and all that good stuff. I just want to make sure that what rotation I had this set to as well. So if I'm just jumping into my old project in the coordinates tab, so I had this set to 101 degrees on my dome light. So I'm going to do the same here. So set this to 101 and hit enter on that. Yeah, okay. So I'm basically just rotating the dome light so you can see the shadow is moving around there. Because I'm trying to replicate the lighting setup that I had in this room that I recorded the video. And also you can see that our chessboard pieces, they're shaded on the left and they're highlighted on the right. So we're trying to replicate that here as well with the rotation of the dome light. Cool. Okay. So another thing is the material of our guy. Now this isn't a material tutorial, and honestly, I'm not that comfortable with Redshift materials myself. It takes me a lot of messing around with stuff, and I don't want to be wasting your guys' time here. So what I will do is I'm just going to jump in. Let's stop rendering this. I'm going to jump into my old project where I set this up initially, and I'm going to grab my man material, hit Control C, and I'm going to paste this in. Now I'm going to run through with you guys how I actually created this so that you know what I was doing. I'll apply that to our man and hit play. Okay, so he's looking a lot brighter. So I'm assuming that the dome light, I probably had the intensity cranked down a bit. I just jump into my old project, go into the dome light object. So I had this set to 0.622. So I'll do the same here. 0.622. Yeah, okay. So that is all my lighting settings really that I had set up. I don't think I had any other lights. Oh, I had this Redshift area light set up, but we won't worry about that for now. We can come back to that if we feel like we need to set up another light. This is looking pretty good for the time being. So we'll do another file, save project, and let's talk about the material now. So what I like to do as well when I am playing with the materials in Redshift, I'll go to set this to the original size so that we get a better view of our guy. And I might even crank up the output, the dimensions. So if you click on lock ratio, it's important that we remember to set this back to 1920 by 1080 before we render. But just when you're setting up your materials, it's really handy to kind of scale this up. So then we can get a nice close-up view of our guy. So you can see the materials kind of giving him these lines that look like, you know, a grain of wood kind of a thing, which looks pretty nice. Anyway, so let's just talk about the material itself. So if I jump in here, So this is the material that I fumbled through initially getting this set up. Just a lot of trial and error with trying different stuff out. So first of all, I had the standard. So if you create any material in Redshift, this is what you start off with. So I was in there and the settings I played around with. So I basically used my eyedropper tool to grab the color of the pawn so that our man was going to be the same color. I reduced the diffuse weight a bit because if you just kind of crank that up, let's hit play now so we can see what we're doing. He seemed a bit too bright. So I brought that down a bit to darken it a bit. Reflection, I set that down to this value. And for roughness, I used a ramp, which was being, or not a ramp, I should say. For the roughness, I was driving the reflection roughness with this texture to give it a kind of a smudged kind of look as if fingerprints have been on it to try and replicate, you know, the very roughness of the reflection of the actual pawns. And I found this texture inside the content drawer. I'm going to do a quick file save project. So in my content drawer, I just typed in imperfections. And it's not going to tell me the name of this. Fingerprint 05. Okay, cool. So fingerprints 05. It is, make this bigger again. I wonder if I just type in fingerprint 05. I wonder. Yeah, so there it is. This is what I used. Just click and drag that in. And the reason so if I solo this, you can see what it looks like. That's what it looks like by itself. And then I plugged that into a ramp so that I was able to basically increase the amount of whiteness so that wherever it's white, it's going to be more rough. Wherever it's white, the reflection is going to be rougher. Wherever it's black, it's not going to have any effect. And then everything in between is in between. So I just used a ramp. If I slide this way, see that the white becomes less. Slide it back that way, we have more white. That means we have more rough reflections. So that was the roughness being driven by this texture and this ramp to give us our nice roughness. If I plug that out, you can see the difference that that's making. Let's just plug that back in. And I then had my coat set up. So if I turn this all the way down, you can see that we're losing that kind of, it's like a varnish, like a layer of varnish. So all of these chess pieces, they all have like what you might describe as a layer of varnish over them to give them an extra bit of like thin kind of shininess, I suppose. So that even now feels a little bit high for me. I know that why that might be. We'll come back to that in a minute. But that was my coat. I set it to this value. And I drove the roughness of this with the exact same fingerprints smudgy texture thingy, and I did the same ramp. I basically just copy and pasted this and plugged that into the roughness. Now you're not going to see this straight away. What you're going to do is just click and drag it up here. This roughness plug won't be visible. Then you just release and you're going to be able to find coat roughness. Just like that. Okay. And what else did I do? Okay, so I had this like bump map. So I'll just zoom out a bit here. So I had a bump map set up. And I used this texture here to drive the bump map. Now if I click on this, hopefully it'll show me the name of that texture. Let's see. Maybe if I stop rendering for a second. Okay, here it is. So I used this ashbump.jpg. So let's see. I think I went into the content browser for that. I'll type in ash bump. Yeah, okay. So ash_bump, and you'll be able to get that here. Just drag that in. Again, I plugged it into a ramp so that I could change the white black values. And then I initially plugged that. Into a bump map. So just double click, go to bump map, and then you'll be able to get a bump map here. And then I had this just plugged directly into the bump map. But I wanted to create another bump layer. So I needed to use this bump blender node. So the reason I wanted to do that is because I wanted to have these scratches. So if I zoom in here, again, I found this in the content drawer. It was in imperfections. I remember that. If I just search imperfections, and if I scroll down to scratches, I think it was. Yeah, so it was one of these. Any of these will do. One of these scratches maps, and I used that so that I could get some nice scratches. So they're very hard to see. It's very subtle, but they are there. If I just kind of like hold down Shift and just kind of do a render of this, we'll see if we can see. So you might be able to see there's some little scratches here. It's super subtle. So subtle, in fact, that you might say you don't even want to bother doing that yourselves. But I said I'd do it anyway. So I grabbed my scratches bump map or scratches map from the content drawer, and I dragged it in. I then created this bump blender so that I could blend these two bumps together. You just double click, type in bump blender, and it was here. Drag that in, and then it was just simply a case of plugging in the ramp into the input, the base layer, and then I plugged in my scratches map into the bump input. And I have another one here, which again was giving me further bumps. So I had a bunch of different bumps set up just to give me this effect. And it was just, again, the reason I'm not building this live is because I know I'd probably mess something up. So I hope that you guys are able to kind of follow along with my kind of quick run through here. A couple of other changes that I did was in the bump map itself. Let's see, stop rendering this for a second and then render again. If I click on the bump map, okay, so now it's working. Sometimes it just gets stuck. So if I open my bump map and if I hit play so you can see what I'm talking about here, I was able to change the height scale. So I had it set to 0.5. If I crank this up to 2, you'll see that we're getting a lot more definition on that bump. So obviously felt like that was a bit too much. So I just set that to 0.5. And that was how I went about creating this material. And I know it's not ideal to not run through it live, but again, I just mess it up and then a whole bunch of time is going to be wasted. So that was that for the material. Let's do a file save project. I think we're able to then reset our dimensions back to 1920 by 1080. And we'll set this to fit window. Okay, so I think that was pretty much it. If I just close this down now, I think that was pretty much it. Oh wait, we have some reflection as well. We want to have some reflection. If I go back to original size, so you can see that the chess pieces are being reflected by the chessboard. So we don't have that here. Is he actually on the floor? Let's just make sure he is on the floor. Slightly hovering a bit. We'll bring him down. There we go. So we want to get some reflection back on our chessboard. So if we go into our floor, grab the Redshift object tag and go to matte, then we're able to crank up the reflection scale. And we need to create a material for our floor, for our chessboard, we'll say floor. So let's create a new material. We'll call that floor. And let's apply that to our floor. So now you can see that we're getting this reflection. It's not very visible. I think that might have been why I set up a light. So we'll quickly just set up a light to see if we can improve the reflection that we're getting on our board. It is there, but we might be able to improve on it a bit. If I just go into my default camera here. And so this is the room I recorded this video, and kind of over here is where there's a huge light source, like a giant sliding doors, we'll say. Not a giant one either, just a normal size standard door, sliding doors. Anyway, so let's grab an area light for this, and we can right click, go to animation tags and grab a target tag. We can use our guy geometry as the target, and let's just pull this back, bring it up, and I'm going to kind of go into my top view here to position this kind of whereabouts the door is. Something like that. Let's see what we're actually doing here. If I hit render, and we can set this to be the Redshift camera. So now let's just make this light bigger. So now it looks like our reflection is it's more defined now with this light in. So I'm going to make this wider. I made it taller. I'm going to make it wider. No, I'm not going to make it wider. I don't like it wider. The shadow is a bit too dark, I feel like. Let's pull it back. Bring it forward again. And we can just reduce the shadow manually. So for the reflection, if I turn this off, yeah, you can see that that is making a big difference for the actual visibility of the reflection. So that's cool. But back to the light settings, we want to just bring down the transparency, or bring up the transparency of the shadow. Something like that's a bit better. And yeah, okay, I think that's looking pretty good. Now, when I did do this test, as you know, you guys, I did a test on this before I'll just close this down. So I rendered this out, and my reflection was barely visible. So I think what I might try this time is, now I didn't try this, but render out a reflection pass, so that we're going to be able to control our reflections inside of After Effects separately. We'll do a file save. But okay, first things first. So we're going to set this up for render now. So let's just go to Fit Window, and we'll have a look at this animation as well, because we haven't actually done that in a while, just to make sure everything's hunky-dory. Excuse me. Okay, so everything's looking pretty good as far as the animation, everything in the track. That's fine. So now if we hit render, so all we want to see is our guy, our shadows, and our reflections. So we need to go into the Redshift camera, go to the background, and we're going to turn this off. So now we're good. We can just see our guy and our reflections, and yeah, and our shadows are there as well. If we go to our alpha view, so now we have this big giant white thing. So that is being caused by the dome light. So that's not going to be transparent. That's opaque. We want the black represents transparency, white represents actual pixels. It's going to be rendering out pixels. So if we go to our dome light, we're going to turn off the background. So now we have transparency, we have our shadows, and we're going to hopefully have a more controllable reflection once we set up this AOV. So let's do a file, save project, and now we can jump into our render settings. So we're rendering this out 1920 by 1080. We're going to be rendering out all frames. We're going to be saving this as a PNG sequence, and we'll come back to that in a second. Let's go and find AOVs. So I'm not really good with AOVs. Don't even know where they are, to be honest. Okay, here they are. So, another thing as well, we want to turn on motion blur because we want to have this as realistic as possible. So let's turn on our motion blur. Okay. And that's good. So back to the AOVs, go in here and let's show the AOV manager. So we're going to be rendering out a reflection pass. Let's just find reflections. See refract. Okay, so there it is. So reflections, hopefully that's going to give us a separate reflection pass, and we're going to be able to, now I haven't tested this now. I did render this out already, but I didn't test it with the AOV, so hopefully it's going to give us a better result. So we have our AOVs, we have our reflections pass set up. Back into save, we're going to be saving the regular image out to a folder called sequences. And this is going to be our chess comp main. And then the multipass image, we're going to be saving this out also as a PNG sequence. And we're going to save this into our AOV folder. And this is reflection. Okay. And we want to make sure, absolutely, to turn on alpha channel. Otherwise, we're in trouble. Okay, so that's output is fine. All frames, 1920 by 1080. Saving it out here and here. Alpha channel is turned on, and we have our motion blur enabled. One last thing as well. If I just go out of this, hit play, I want to get some depth of field rocking as well on the camera. So we're going to have to turn this back on so we can see what we're doing. And let's go to original size. So you can see, like, with regards to this camera, a lot of the stuff in the foreground is quite, out of focus. So we want to replicate that as well. We jump into our top view here in our viewport. We can go into our Redshift camera, go to optical, turn on bokeh, and we'll set this to like 2. So now you can see that he is nice and out of focus looking, similarly to the pawns. If we bring this back to here, he's more in focus. So I think the camera is like around, it looks like it's focused in around the center of the board. So yeah, that's looking pretty good. Hold down Shift to kind of grab this crop selection, and we'll just do a bucket render here, see what that's looking like. Okay. Okay, so that's it, guys. Almost. So again, we're just going to turn off the background, making sure that we're only getting that. And we'll go back to fit to window. And we are good to go. Cool. Okay, file, save project. And I'm actually going to just render this to picture viewer instead of the render queue. Because why not? I want to check, the why not is actually because I want to make sure that this is rendering out okay as we go. Okay. So that's rendering away. So while it is, what we could do is we could jump into After Effects just to test a few of these frames as it's rendering out. Okay, so while that's rendering away, let's jump back into After Effects. Let's open up the chess comp project that we started off with, and let's just double click in this panel here, and we go to sequences, and we can grab the main sequence. Well, as many frames that is rendered out. Now, I haven't jumped straight into this, so I probably have more frames rendered than you guys have. Let's just drag this down to our main composition here. And I'm going to drag the timeline indicator up to the point where it's rendered. Hit N on my keyboard so that we can just focus on this area here. So far, so good. But as you can see, our reflections are visible, but they are very faint. So hopefully now the AOV manager or the reflection pass is going to sort that out for us. Let's grab this and just double click. We can bring this beneath our main render. We need to set the blend mode here to screen. Now if we turn this off and on, you can see our reflection is now more visible, and we have control over this now in the sense that we are able to duplicate this reflection pass, hit Control D, and again, and I think I'm happy enough with that. So 2 duplicates of the reflection pass, and that's looking pretty good. Couple of other things we can do to kind of sell this a bit more is we might make this a little bit more blurry, because it seems like our scene is little bit more blurry than our guy. We can do some color correction as well. Let's just do a file save. We'll first of all do some color correction on our actual video. So we'll grab a lumetri effect here with the layer selected that we want to use this on. Double click on it. Let's go to basic correction, and if we grab this eyedropper tool, we can set the white balance here. Just find something white. I don't like that. Undo that. I'm going to leave that as is. I'm going to go to curves, and I'm going to bring the shadows down a bit and bring up the highlights a little bit just for a bit more contrast. Turn that off and on. Looks a bit better. And I might increase no, I think I'll leave that as is. And then we'll go and do some lumetri for our main render. So select the main render layer, double click on lumetri color. We can go and do some basic correction here. So we can maybe mess around with the temperature of this. I like it as is. I'm not even going to, well, it's set to 1, but I think I like it as is. Highlights, let's bring that up a bit. No, preferred it as is. Maybe a little bit, or sorry, maybe just a little bit. Yeah, I think I like that a bit more. And we'll see if the curves makes it look any little bit better. Just bring down the shadows and up with the highlights a little bit. We can turn that off and on. Yeah, I think that's a little bit better. And we need to match the grain as well. Oh, we'll do that last because that's quite heavy on the RAM, on the VRAM. So we'll get some Gaussian blur. And let's zoom in here. So Z or Z on your keyboard to get the magnifying glass tool. Let's just bring this up a little bit more. That's even too much. You know what? I think we don't need Gaussian blur. Maybe just like 0.5. Super subtle. And then finally, we want to use match grain to match the grain of our video to our guy. So let's select the top layer here, our main render, double click on match grain. The match source layer is our video, chess video MP4, and set that to final output. So now if we get this to 100%, it's going to be very, very subtle, but there is going to be some grain that's going to be matched to the grain from our video. And then it's just a case of waiting for your render to finish. And then that's it, guys. So this is rendering out quite fast. What have we got? It's rendering out quite fast. It's not taking very long per frame on my machine anyway. And then once that's done, you will have a nice, fully rendered video. So that's it for me, guys. Thanks for sticking around to the end and watching. As always, I hope you learned a lot. And if you do, you can help me out with the YouTube algorithm by hitting that like button. And if you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.